here, bringing you the Pro Report with my co-host Joe Spano. You can find Joe on Twitter at Joe Spano56. You can find me on Twitter at Mad Journalist with two D's. That's MADD Journalist. We're here to talk about Game 3 overall betting strategy for the NBA Finals, what our best bets are. We're going to take a look and start this off by looking at the Action Network Pro Report. We're also looking at numbers from Bison's DraftKings Consensus Money Report, as well as pregame.com's Game Center to look at discrepancies between ticket count versus cash count on the side, on the total, etc. We're also going to talk about series prices, series props, and then probably dive into some player props using the advanced data from NBA.com towards the end of the show as well. This will be available. You can see it on Twitter, on YouTube stream as a live stream video. This is brought to you by sportsmaplete.com. And you can also catch this as a podcast on our new podcast feed. You can find it under the Pro Report on any of your audio streaming, podcast streaming platforms with Christelle and Joe Spano. So, Joe, I just want to jump into things here as we go through. We kind of recap a little bit, maybe Game 2. Let's take a look at some of the numbers, because we were talking about using these three different data points here. Between Action Network, Vice, and pregame.com. Obviously, there's others out there in the industry, but the number that we noticed was that there's a big discrepancy on the bet percentage and the money percentage on the under for this game. And we've seen a big move already. The line opened at around 215.5. Now we're seeing at 212.5 at a lot of places. And you yourself, you're anticipating that to tick under potentially at least another half point before tip-off on Wednesday night. We're seeing, according to Action Network's Pro Report, sharp money on the under, also big money on the under. I would say probably, I listen to a lot of betting podcasts myself, a lot of different betting analysts in terms of basketball. And a lot of people that I know, a lot of sharp people are also on the under as well for this game. I was already leaning that way, player prop wise, just based on the data we saw in Game 2. But I kind of want to just get your thoughts overall, because I know you focus heavily yourself on sides and totals, and you got a pretty strong feeling for the total in this game as well.
I absolutely do, Chris, and I do like the under. I like the under. My eye test and my deep analysis using advanced metrics and all the different tools that I use to come up with a play before even getting into computer models and sharp money and everything else, I like the under. I thought it was pretty close at 212.5, but I like the under. That was a direction I was going. Then when you start looking at the betting signals, they're really, really strong on the under. As you mentioned, this game opened at 215.5. That opening is a little deceiving. That actual open, you look at some of the things, that open was literally at very early. By Monday morning, this had kind of settled in at around 213. And it hasn't been much movement, but we're quickly watching the money percentage go up on the under. We're really seeing the money continue to grow. The percentage of bets, that's been pretty consistent. It's been in the 40s all the way through. That's starting to climb a little bit, but what's really starting to climb is the percentage of money wagered on the under. It's now 44% of the bets are on the under. The money, the handles climbed all the way up to 73%, according to the Action Network. And now, despite, early on, after the move down to from 213 down to about 212.5, this line's been pretty stagnant. We're now I'm locked in at 212.5. We are now starting to see movement on this line. WinBet's already down to 212. BetUS is down to 212. DraftKings is down to 212. With some of the other books, BetMGM, BetRivers, PointsBet, they're all still hanging around at 212.5. Caesars is still at 212.5 as well, and FanDuel. But I think with the way this is trending, we're seeing a bet percentage that's going to hang somewhere between 40 and 55%, I expect, by game time. But we're going to see handle continue to climb up. It's in the 70s or 80. 70s already. I think it could head towards 80. So lock in that 212.5 if you like the under like I do, and I like it pretty strong, because I don't think as this gets closer to game time, you're going to get 212.5. I think you're going to see 212 pretty much universally not long after we finish this show. And pretty much I'm confident that by game time, this is going to be somewhere around 211, maybe even lower than that. I think the trends are really that strong there as far as how the money is being moved on and played on this under. The sharp money is really strong on the under, much stronger than it is on the side. With the Celtics opening a 3.5 point favorite, there's been literally almost no movement on that. And to kind of take this further, we talked about the pro report and how they're handling and their numbers on handle versus percentage of bets versus handle. Well, we're seeing the same thing on VSiN's consensus money report. 38% of the bets on the under. So again, they have, the smaller percentage of the bets are on the under. They have a handle of 46%. So again, a lot of the same indications as the sharp as the pro report on the Action Network. The numbers are a little different, but again, a lot of the same indications. Action Network much stronger. We're seeing major sharp action tracked, and we're seeing big money tracked. But again, the DraftKings consensus report is consistent, and it's telling us the same thing. It's the same indicators that the under is where the sharp money was going. You mentioned pregame's Game Center, and they're telling
might increase there too.
Yeah, they're telling a similar story as well. You're seeing the under 44% of the tickets, 49% of the handle. So this is pretty consistent here that the sharp money by all of these tracking devices that we're using, the sharp money clearly appears to be on the under in this game. The Action Network, strongest of all, with all of their betting signals indicating that the under is the way to go. They're showing 44% of the bets again, 73% of the handle. They indicate sharp action and big money. So there's huge betting signals on the under. My analytics like the under as well for a number of reasons here, Chris. Number one, the Celtics are a great road team. And they have been in these playoffs. They've actually been better on the road than they have been at home. And they're only putting up 105.7 points a game at home during the postseason. And that's playing against the Milwaukee series became defensive focused, but it played at a pretty quick pace, especially in the early going. And the Nets series played at a fairly quick pace. But, so they're not scoring a ton of points at home, but they're playing incredible defense at home, only allowing 100 points a game in the playoffs. And that's 9 games, decent sample size of postseason run. They're only allowing 100.1 points a game at home in the postseason. Pace of play slowing down to about 94.2. And then in turn, you look at the Warriors. The Warriors, we've talked about how good they are at home. Extremely ordinary on the road, both during the regular season and in the postseason. They're putting up 110 points a night on the road. The efficiency's not great, only 112.6 rating. They're playing faster because look at the opponents they've played. Denver couldn't slow them down, and Memphis wanted to go fast. So their road games have played fast, but the Warriors haven't necessarily played well, and they don't bring great offensive efficiency on the road. They're not nearly as good a road team as they are at home. The Celtics locking it down on defense at home, not great offensively and slowing it down. So to me, there's enough here based on the postseason sample size and even the Warriors' lack of dominance in the regular season offensively that I think the under's the definite play because when I looked at the Warriors during the regular season as far as their offensive efficiency on the road or lack thereof, I didn't really take the second half of the season after the All-Star break where, as you know, they were dealing with a ton of injuries, Chris. They
Right.
didn't have their core lineup for most of the second half, and they really slowed games down and focused on defense. I went pre-All-Star game where they were playing better ball, and they were brilliant at home. On the road, they're only scoring 107.1 points a game and an offensive rating of just 109.8. So this is not a team whose offense necessarily is traveling real well on the road. And we have sizable sample sizes in both the regular season when they were at their best and in the post at points where they were at their best and in the postseason where they've been pretty dominant. It hasn't carried on the road. So I really think that the Celtics are going to dictate terms here, slow this game down to a speed a lot more like game one, which played right around 94 as opposed to 98. And I think this one slides under the total. I like the under pretty strong, but I don't think this under is going to be as easy as my confidence is in it. I don't think this is going to be one of those games that's under by 20 points. I think there may be some sweating here because I think there may be periods in this game where the offenses click and the tempo picks up and you get one of those good quarters that makes this a little closer than you'd like. But ultimately, I think it definitely does hit under the total.
Yeah. I mean, I think we saw even in game two, we saw the explosion of points in the latter half of the first quarter, whereas like even in the beginning of the game, the first 6 minutes, that looked like it was trending towards an under type of game. And then the second quarter, we saw a combined 41 points. And then in the third quarter, even with the Warriors' third quarter explosion, again, I think they've outscored Boston about 78-38 overall in the third quarter. I still lean towards Golden State third quarter again, just not as strong on the road in this zigzag type of format where, the Boston obviously hasn't lost consecutive games in the playoffs. Neither has Golden State, I believe. But now we're going back to Boston for game three. It's just a lean for me right now in Golden State third quarter money line, although it's still something that's on my consideration in terms of what I'm considering for my card for game three. But again, like we still saw a combined 49 points still, even with that explosion in the third quarter there. Obviously, fourth quarter was a lot of garbage time, a lot of bench players playing. We only saw 44 points again. But if you take out that quarter one, we definitely saw a strong trend towards the under there. And if you obviously you combine the averages from game one and game two, it's not the greatest sample in the world to take, but that puts you right at about 211.5. So I'm with you. I still think there is value on the under there. Make sure to shop around if you're looking towards totals, et cetera. I mean, we're looking at the oddsjam.com board right now, which is what I pulled up. The best number you can get on the under is like, pretty much Circa Sports, which is obviously you have to be in certain locations to get that. I'm pretty sure that's still just in Vegas, but 213.5 you can get at minus 117. But FanDuel still has 213.5 minus 120. Is it worth the 10 cents? I mean,
I don't know. Yeah, it's expensive. It's starting to get expensive.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation for another day in terms of long-term EV on that type of stuff. But you look at the under 212.5, you can get Caesars, you can get BetMGM, you can get FanDuel minus 110 right now. If you're looking at the average of the series, which is right at 211.5, and you still lean under, I think that what I like to do is kind of like the escalator type of bets where, hey, I'm going to take 2 units, I'm going to put a unit and a half on the under. I'm going to take a quarter unit, sprinkle it on some all plays, like under 211.5. You can get a FanDuel plus 102. Let's go all the way down to say, the last game was 195. And now we're looking at go down to even to 5.5. You can get that at FanDuel plus 176, the best number on the board right now. You want to look all the way down to a number we saw in game two, and we saw a lot in the Boston Celtics past 2 series with Miami and Milwaukee, which was the total going under 200.
Yes.
You can get under 199.5 at plus 330. So I think if you really like the total in this game and like that zigzag theory going back to Boston, playing defense, the Warriors haven't really had a poor shooting performance yet in the playoffs. So, that could play a factor here to where I think there is decent value on sprinkling just a little bit of your action on the total of playing some of these alt lines at under 199.5 plus 330. I probably wouldn't go much lower than that, but I think that is decent value there at plus 330. I'm not sure what you think, Joe, just real quick before we move on from total to side series prices, et cetera. But, looking at, minus 120 for 213.5, minus 110 for 212.5, where do you usually lie in terms of what the price is for each of these numbers? How much do you value that? Kind of looking at the odds board right now as we're talking about it.
Well, I mean, it's going to cost. Normally, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you $5 for half a point. I mean, that's just the standard in our industry.
Right.
You know, if you can get a little bargain on that, you're probably going to take that at half a point. If you got to pay a premium for it, unless you really, really think you need it,
Yeah.
I
what
would.
are the chances, right, that it's going to hit on that exact point? I would rather sell a point.
I mean, I love
to get the
line
better
value.
number.
I've been beat enough by hooks and and either being indecisive or moving late and getting bad lines that it's cost me. So I've been caught enough that I understand the value.
Right.
And I don't think, while I like the idea, while I think this is going to be an under, I don't know that it's going to be one of those that's going to get under 200. I like the idea at 3-1, almost 3-1. Taking a sprinkle on it makes perfect sense if you're really, if it ends up being one of those games where Golden State comes out, completely lays the egg as they're prone to do on the road. I get it. I just think here, every ounce of line value you can get could be important because of the moments that we've seen where these teams can catch fire, and the next thing you know, they're hitting, and it could push it close. I mean, within this game, you're going to have those type of runs, like you talked about earlier with Game 2. You had you had the first 6 minutes of the first quarter. Oh boy, this one's not even. This one's going to be easy. Then they catch fire. You look, oh boy, now we're leaning towards over. So there's constant ebb and flow as two elite offenses battle two elite defenses.
Right.
I just, as you say, I'm expecting the Warriors, who are not nearly as good offensively on the road, to struggle, to have their worst offensive performance of the series. I'm expecting the game to slow down. I'm expecting Boston to bring their normally solid defense, their normally elite defense, as they've brought it for most of this series. And I don't expect them to dominate offensively, but I expect them to do enough to win this game and probably get right around or maybe just a hair above their average at home in the postseason, somewhere around 105, 106 points, but no more than that. I don't see the Warriors getting much above 100. And if you're looking for another play on this under, the Warriors team total under is another way to look. So that's a couple of things that I'm seeing in
and
this.
That also cashed in game 2 with them winning.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's another angle I could see is the Warriors team total under, because I think this is the game they struggle offensively. They've shown that their offense doesn't travel all that well. And in the playoffs, so that's just kind of how I see this one unfolding as far as that total.
Yeah, I like that as well. That's a strong lean for me right now. Also, something under consideration. I just want to pull up the odds for that too. The best line you can find right now, and we saw it at 108.5 in the last couple of games. Now at 104.5 for Golden State. Some of the books here have it juiced towards the over. You can get, it's kind of between that. You can pay minus 120 to get under 105.5. You can play minus 120 to get over 104.5, but I lean that way as well, according to everything that we've seen so far in these playoffs. With these two teams here, Boston getting the benefit of the whistle at home, where I thought that, I'm not saying the referees are trying to sway these things one way or another, but when a team is down in a 7-game series, you're going to see more calls at home, I believe. And we saw that, I think, more early than not in game 2. Draymond Green, I don't know if you're a wrestling fan, Joe, but he put the Goldberg spear on Grant Williams in the second quarter, and they called a blocking foul on Grant Williams. I thought that one was hilarious. There was another play where Gary Payton was on a fast break layup, and he flew in the air, and he had zero contact with Jaylen Brown and just fell to the ground, and they called a foul on Jaylen Brown. It looked like for a second that Boston's guys were going to enter halftime with foul trouble, but They wind up not getting into foul trouble, but I think maybe it takes away from some of the intensity. And one thing we saw in the Miami series, we're so quick to forget things in these playoffs, but in the games that Boston struggled, they struggled, I think, mentally as well, because you saw turnovers, you saw sloppy play. And what you also saw in those losses was they talked about it publicly to the media, Coach Udoka, et cetera. They cared way too much about the officials in the games that they were losing. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to see they're going to realize what they did. Hey, we let Draymond get under our skin. We let the referees get under our skin. We got to go back to playing our brand of basketball. And I think you're going to see that, especially in this type of scenario in a game 3. Now let's move on from the total. So you like the under 212.5, get the best closing line values possible. I lean with you as well. I lean with you also on the Golden State under 104.5 team total because of Boston's ability to come out and play possibly their best defensive game.
I'll even go to 103.5 at plus 110. Here's a spot where it's a point, and I'm getting $30 here. I'm going from, I'm going under one, actually 15. So I like that. Under 104.5 to is minus 105. Under 103.5 should be plus 105. It's plus 110. That's a lot. That's some value there. So I might look at that because I think that's a point you can afford, and and I like to get into plus money. So that might be something I might well look at.
Yeah. Or if we see another game 2 and just roll reversal for game 3, then you look at the alt totals again, like just putting that out there and putting that on your radar to see what those price differences are, because that is a good catch that the minus 103.5, you're seeing that big of a turnaround in terms of how much juice you're getting on the dollar there. But also under 99.5, like the Celtics scored 88 points in game 2. Maybe we see a similar fortune for Golden State having a poor performance offensively in game 3, plus 185 you can get on BetMGM right here when you're looking at the odds board. I mean, even if they did what Boston did in game 2, which I don't think is going to happen, but hey, it's within the realm of possibility. How much do you want to allocate in terms of what you're betting? Extreme alt line here, under 89.5 points, plus 575 at that 365. So just kind of seeing those options.
Why the hell not for a quarter unit or something like that? Why the hell not?
I mean, you throw 1/10 of a unit, and you come up a half unit on that type of play, and you kind of add that to your portfolio. I don't think that's that bad of a bet. I like to do those things when it comes to golf betting a lot as well.
Absolutely. What do you say we flip now to the side where?
So looking at the pro report, we don't see the sharp money signal, quote unquote, or the big money signals yet. But we are seeing another discrepancy in terms of more cash on Boston on the spread than there is tickets. And usually when we see that, that's an indicator of some type of sharp money just in general. Or
sharp money was indicated on the Celtics earlier.
Okay.
And remember I told you that indicator is fluid. It'll come and it'll go. Earlier on, the indicator was on that there was sharp money along with these discrepancies of tickets written compared to handle. That sharp indicator fell off about 3 hours ago.
Yeah.
Just so you know. So it was on there at one point, but the betting percentages have kind of stayed consistent with the Celtics taking sub 50% of the tickets, but they're slightly over 50% of the handle.
And we're seeing differences because we're seeing on Bison and pregame.com that a majority of the handle, the cash, is on the Warriors on those two places too. 61% on Bison and 70% on the Warriors, according to pregame.com. So
we're getting some light indicators that the Celtics are taking the smart and sharp money.
Yeah.
The Celtics are only getting 35% of the bets on the VSiN consensus money report, but they are taking 39% of the handle.
So two of the 3 places we're looking at are pointing towards Boston for sure.
Right. So it's a small edge, but it's an edge. And in turn, you said, what did you say about the Game Center on pregame?
They're showing a little bit difference there. They're showing about even 30%, 31% between cash and tickets on Boston. They're showing 70%, basically 30-70. It's 70% on the Warriors, 30% on the Celtics, and they're not showing they're showing a 1% difference on the cash and ticket count for each of those teams.
That's not really enough to indicate anything. We know the public is on the Warriors just because they're the Warriors. And you can fade. You could take this as an opportunity to fade the public, which oftentimes is a good way to handle this. Stay away from the squares and be sharp. But I don't think there's enough. But overall in this, the signals and indicators that we like, they're much stronger on the under than they are on the side here. There's indicators towards the Celtics, but they're not nearly as strong as the indicators on the Warriors.
Yeah. Well,
So
a strong indication for.
Here's what I would say: wherever you're leaning, the indicators aren't strong enough to make you kind of hesitate. So if you're a guy who's leaning Warriors in this spot, I don't think the indicators are enough to scare you off. But if you like the Celtics in this spot, the indicators make you feel good about your play.
Well, an indicator for me, this is just looking at it from a pure market perspective, is we talk about home court advantage, Joe, and I don't know how much you personally give home court advantage in the NBA. I know some people that go points. You go 3.5 points.
Yeah.
I mean, I know some people that do their own power ratings that go 2.5 to 3 points. So it's somewhere in that range, right? The fact is, like, let's call it an even 3. We're now saying that Boston's a half point better than Golden State, looking at that line potentially, or at the worst, these two are even teams. So Golden State had that advantage in games 1 and 2. Golden State's coming off a 20-plus point blowout defeat of Boston. And now the market's saying that the Celtics are slightly better after taking a beatdown in game 2. Now, that surprises me a little bit, but that to me points to the fact that the market has grown to like Boston more now, coming into the fact that we have 5 games left in the series. Boston has 3 of them at home. Golden State has 2 of them at home. Now, granted, like, this is where I get a little hesitant in terms of like series price value, because I thought that we talked about this before the series started, Joe. I thought that, hey, like, even if it splits 1-1, you're still going to have value betting Boston on the series price going into game 3. And I was wrong on that. Like, I'm very surprised to see the fact that Boston's minus 115 to win the series on DraftKings. Like, what we're assuming is like that Boston is a strong favorite to go up 3-1. I personally just don't see that happening. Like, I would be really surprised if we come into this series in game 5 with either team up 3-1. I see this as a 2-2 series here. And if that's the case, that means that you're going to get better value by waiting to bet Boston again, because then if you go into game 5, Golden State's going to have the home court advantage back again.
Yeah. More indicators on the books now liking the Celtics more than they did before the series started. Look at series MVP. Tatum before the series started was plus 175. I got it at. Yeah. Even now tied 1-1, it's plus 155.
And that's not bad. That's not bad, because that's to me is the best value. That's the best value if you still like Boston, is take Tatum to win Finals MVP. But on DraftKings, that's all the way down now to plus 115.
Wow. Okay, yeah. I've seen it other places.
So that's a significant. I did not think it would move more than 50 cents there after that.
These are big indicators here that one apiece, the loss of home court advantage, and the sentiment has really swung towards the Celtics being the favorite. More than, sometimes, as you said, you can glean how the books are seeing things, not necessarily on the side or the total, which might indicate how they see the game playing out, but on these prop bets and on these series bets where the way that they've moved or not moved can tell you a lot about how the books are seeing things. And I think those are a couple examples that we just pointed out, that the books have the Celtics installed firmly as favorites going forward. And I agree with you. The Celtics have been vulnerable at home during the postseason. And they have at times when they've had the chance to, kind of stand on the neck of some quality opposition in the postseason and shortened series, they've played with their food a little bit. and coughed up advantages. You saw, not that I expected them to win. I mean, when we talked before game one, I said they're winning game one, losing game two. I was right. So I kind of see the same thing here. I didn't think they'd win both games, but they played with their food quite a bit in game two, and they got blown out for their troubles. Game three, I like them to come back, take control of the series. Like you, I then think they coughed some of that back up in game four. That's just how I see this going through 4 games. I don't expect there to be a series leader after 4 games. I expected knotted at 2 apiece, and in essence, you'll have a 3-game series with Boston, with Golden State having home court advantage, which could be a home court disadvantage, as good as Boston is on the road.
Yeah. That to me is like I really don't like when people say they stole home court advantage by taking one of the first 2 games on the road, because what happens if these two teams just split in each of the first 4 games, then the team they never lost home court advantage.
Right. Well, they stole it and they had it, and then they just gave it back.
They gave it back,
so,
right?
You really got to look at it. Where are you after 4 games? If Boston isn't up 3-1, they stole home court advantage, but they got to take them back again, and they're right back where they were before.
That's the thing. If Boston wins at game 3 and then they lose game 2 and the series ties up, then they don't have home court advantage.
No,
so I look, it's like so that means the team that steals one on the road and steals home court advantage, they have to go undefeated 2-0 at home in order to quote unquote maintain home court advantage. So I think we get a little bit lost in terms of the value sometimes on that, because again, like if you bet Boston right now, Boston's the favorite -115. But if we go into Golden State in game 5 with the series tied 2-2, Boston won't be -115 anymore.
No.
So again, like I'm not saying to wait.
Here's the funny thing. They won't be -115 anymore. We get all caught up in it. And you look at how well, you look at how well Boston plays on the road. Having to play 2 out of 3 games on the road to perhaps close out this series is not the disadvantage that many think it would be. They beat Miami in a game 7. I mean, they've been doing some heavy game 7 lifting on the road in this postseason. They've done some heavy lifting in general on the road in this postseason.
Yeah, I value Golden State at home a little bit more than those teams that they played, and then offensively. But I mean, I agree with you. The fact that I'm not going to doubt, but the fact is, like, you're going to get a better number if the series is tied up 2-2 on the series price, on the MVP price. So again, like to me, it's like if you like Boston now, shop around, because FanDuel still has the +140 for Tatum. It's interesting to see, like DK must have taken a pretty large bet, or at least a pretty large total number of bets, big money bets on Tatum, to have that be a 25-cent difference between FanDuel and DraftKings +115 to +140. I think +140 is decent value. I bet Curry to win MVP before the Heat Celtics series was over. I got that at about +130. Now, look, I didn't hedge. I haven't hedged yet, because going into game 1, I thought Golden State was more likely to win than not. So I was like, let me wait until game 1's over. Then I'm going to bet Boston on the series and kind of hedge my bets there. Now, that didn't happen. It happened the opposite way. But still, even after seeing the Celtics lose, I feel like I'm not getting the number that I thought I would get. I think it's because, as we've talked about, like the market's kind of caught up and saying, hey, look, like these are even teams at worst. Maybe even the Celtics are slightly better at this point than the Warriors, despite coming off a 20-plus point loss. So that's kind of how I view the market right now. Like I'm looking more at like NBA series props, continuing to bet those. I bet after game 1, I bet Jason Tatum. My favorite prop bet on the series was to bet Jason Tatum to average more than 6.6 assists per game. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, he only had 3 assists, didn't play the entire fourth quarter, but he did have 3 at halftime. So even in a game where he became the primary scorer again for Boston, he still had 3 assists at half, and we had 13 assists in the first game. So we're still above that average for the series. I'm going to look at series props like that based on the advanced data from NBA.com, potential assists, rebounding chances, etc. And we'll have our full cards up available on SportsMapElite.com by the end of today, Tuesday night, June 1st. It'll be out probably around the time we publish this as a podcast Tuesday evening. But that's kind of my thought process of how I'm looking to take advantage of the series prop market, not just individual player props for Game 3. But we'll probably transition to that here. I don't know if you have anything else on series prices, MVP, Joe. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, I think there is a little bit of value on Tatum plus 140. I might sprinkle a little bit in terms of what I have on Curry at this price, because again, like if the Celtics win tonight and then lose Game 3, we might see the same number at that plus 140 for Tatum.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Really, I don't really have much more on the side. I like Boston in this spot. The indicators, again, if you're a guy who thinks this is a good spot for the Warriors, this is not a spot where indicators and betting signals are going to chase you off. Go with what you got. Go with what your analytics tell you. For me, my analytics tell me that the Celtics are going to win in this spot. The Warriors struggle on the road. They've struggled in the postseason offensively on the road. They've really struggled defensively in the postseason on the road. So Boston might get some better looks. I don't think it's necessarily going to translate into a ton of points, but it's going to translate into points. Pace is going to slow down here, more to the Celtics' liking. And, again, the Warriors struggles on the road comparatively in the postseason and really in the regular season, even when they were playing their best ball. So I don't expect a stellar offensive performance from the Warriors. I expect a decent offensive performance from the Celtics. They're going to get they're going to be between 105 and 110. That I'm confident that's where we're going to be. Somewhere between 105 and 110 points for them, and your Warriors are probably going to be barely at 100. They're so there's going to be some room here. And again, that's why we like the under, and I like the Celtics to cover this margin with room to spare. I mean, when you look at what the Warriors have done on the road in this postseason, 3-4 straight up, 2-5 against the number. They're just not a good road team, and that's the way it is. Boston's been vulnerable at home, but they're a better home team. They're 5-4 straight up, 4-5 against the number at home against tougher competition. So take the Celtics, lay the 3.5. I talked about how I love the under here. I'm going to sprinkle something on that Warriors team under, and that's a smart play as well. Let's get quick. We got into series prices, MVP prices. If you got some props for tonight that are focusing your attentions, or any final thoughts here on the side here, fire away. Otherwise, let's get into those player props.
Yeah, I want to look just real quick at the props overall. We're not seeing too many series props in terms of what we saw in the market going into Game 2, but a couple things that I'm looking at overall. I want to look at just Game 3. I think I'm going to save some of my series prop research for the end of tonight, because I don't want to just look at Game 2 data. I want to extrapolate Game 2 into like full 36, 40-minute averages for the guys who didn't play in the fourth quarter. I want to combine and see what the averages are between Game 1 and Game 2, because we did see a lot of differences there in terms of what teams made adjustments, et cetera. I want to look at Game 3 game leader props real quick before we jump into the individual props. Looking at the data from NBA.com advanced stats, I want to bring up here on the split screen. Andrew Wiggins led the game with 17 rebounding opportunities. They call them rebounding chances. And he had 6 rebounds, one less than Kevon Looney. Draymond Green wound up with 5. Curry had 6. So Wiggins was one off the leader for his team. And then we look at the Celtics. Al Horford had 13 rebounding chances in about 27.5 minutes. Wiggins played about 30 minutes. So both are going to play more if this game is close, according to the spread here. So I think there is some decent value on playing both these guys. Al Horford you can get as the Game 3 rebounding leader at plus 235. He's the favorite right now to get this. I think that what we've seen out of post-game comments and in-series adjustments throughout these playoffs is that, first of all, there's a chance that Robert Williams could be limited in Game 3. There's been rumors that he might even miss a game in this series here, and it might be to Boston's benefit in the fact that they can go small and focus on that small ball lineup like they did in Game 1. So the fact is that we could see no Robert Williams. He's not even listed as an option here as the leading rebounder in game 3. So I think that there is value despite being the favorite on Al Horford plus 235. Now, I also believe there's some solid value here on Andrew Wiggins. You can get him at 11-1 to be the game 3 rebounding leader. According to the data, even in limited minutes, he still was like basically the deep stat leader. Like he had the most rebounding opportunities in this game. And if the Celtics go small and the Warriors try to combat them with another small ball lineup, I think you're going to see that. We saw also more of a concerted effort to get Draymond Green guarding Jaylen Brown one-on-one. So if we see Draymond spending his time guarding these perimeter players for Boston, we're going to see less rebounding opportunities for him after he was one of the top rebounders for game 1. So I think that's one adjustment. How does Boston counteract that? We'll see. But I think there is value on Wiggins 11-1 in that aspect here. Now, what we're seeing in terms of assists for game 3, I'll pull that up based on game 2, is that the Celtics completely got away from their game plan in game 1 where they were swinging the ball, sharing the ball, swinging it around, getting it to open three-point shooters. We saw them go completely ISO, and credit Golden State's defensive adjustments in that area for having them do that. Tatum's assists went way down in terms of potential assists there. Again, he had 3 in the first half, none in the second half. Derek White was the potential assist leader with 7. I think we see Boston kind of get back to their origins on offense there, and I'm not gonna weigh these numbers as heavily in terms of what the zigzag spot could mean. I think we could see more similarity between game 1's advanced stat data going into game 3 more than we can take from using game 2, which is kind of like what we do from game to game is look at the previous game. I think there's going to be more similarity between game 3 and game 1 in that aspect there.
Uh-huh.
And we saw like Warriors, like their assists have been kind of spread around in terms of a little bit of Steph, a little bit of Draymond. Even we saw Andrew Wiggins with 5 potential assists. Gary Payton came in, had 5 potential assists and 3 real assists off the bench. Jordan Poole, a lot of that in garbage time, 5 potential assists there. So I'm not really sure what to make of the assist leader categories right now, although I think the market is pretty correct there in terms of like they've got 4 guys bunched between plus 230 and plus 350, Draymond, Tatum, Curry, and Smart. I tend to agree with that, and the fact we're not seeing an option for Derek White on that list. So I'm a little bit wary of betting any of those guys at that number there. I do think like you could get away with almost betting Curry. We bet these series props before the finals started. Curry to lead the series in threes made. We talked about that 2 episodes ago on the show. Curry to lead the series in 3-pointers made per game average. You can just bet this from game to game. I mean, I think it's better than plus 140 odds here. I think that's a good number there that he's going to be the threes made leader of game 3. You can get that at plus 140 right now. I think if you just bet that from game to game, yeah, you might only win, let's say 3 out of the next 5 games. But at plus 140, plus 130, et cetera, you're going to come up pretty nicely betting that prop. I like the value there. So that's what I'm looking at. Steph Curry plus 140. I'm just looking at DraftKings numbers right now before I actually put my official card up on sportsmapelite.com. I'm going to go through. I'm going to shop price a little bit. I'm going to check out at least 6, 7, maybe up to a dozen books to see what the best numbers are there. But again, rebound leader for game 3. I think there's a good value on Horford. DraftKings has plus 235. Good value on Wiggins at 11-1. Scoring leader, I'm not going to go there for that specifically, but I am just overall looking at unders. Again, like we're seeing 2 of the top defenses in the league. You mentioned that, Joe. And what they're going to continue to try to do is they're going to force these guys to go ISO one-on-one. They don't want them swinging the ball around and finding these open 3-point shooters. So I think both defense will continue to try to do that successfully. And because of that, you're going to see a depressed number of assists, I think, from top to bottom more often than not, game to game between these 2 teams here. So I'm going to look at these combo props. I'm going to look at a lot of Warriors unders when it comes to their PRA, their points plus rebounds plus assists. I also like looking at unders for the RA, the rebounds plus assists props, where you don't incorporate the scoring there. But from what we saw in game 2, there's a potential for a lot of these guys to go under these numbers because the public wants to bet overs when it comes to player props. And I think we're going to see, especially with the sharp money on the under for game 3, with adjustments coming from Boston's end as well.
I think that's
I see a lot of value. Now, I haven't broken all these down yet. I've just kind of glanced at things in terms of who I think the leaders might be for some plus money stuff. But that's really overall where I feel strongly about, is using the data from games 1 and games 2 and really trying to target some unders that I think we could take advantage of the book for game 3 so far.
But I do think you're spot on with the adjustments that Udoka is going to make from game 2 to game 3. He's a brilliant coach, and that coaching staff does a great job of game to game adjustments in the postseason. And I think that's another factor that weighs into a lot of what how I arrived at some of the plays that I like. You know, whether it be the total, whether it be the Celtics to cover this number on as a side, as a side. I mean, the adjustments that he's going to make from game 2 to game 3, I think are going to be a big factor here. So again, there's coaching. Robert Williams, you mentioned. I don't think he's going to play a big factor. I think this is the game where he does get that rest. I think he'll magically pop up on the injury report and he'll end up out, or he'll play 15 minutes again, because in this matchup, there are times where Robert Williams doesn't help them much, because Boston likes to switch everything on the perimeter, and they like to, and the one guy that they can't switch to is Robert Williams. They can switch when Horford's in the game, they can use him, they can switch him, they can switch everybody. So, if you have Grant Williams and Horford instead of Robert Williams and Horford, or Grant Williams and Robert Williams, it makes their defense that much better. With him likely playing a limited role, that feeds into a lot of unders on a lot of these props, under on the Warriors total, under in general. And I think it bodes well for Boston scoring against a vulnerable on the road Warriors defense in this postseason. They've given up 116.3 points per game in the postseason on the road, and they've a defensive rating of 119.1. So Boston will find a way to score a few points here, and that's going to be their edge.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Now, so my best bet to lead off this live stream and this podcast so far, I'm going to go to some plus money props. I'm going to take a unit. I'm going to split it up between the game leader prop. You can find that on DraftKings. I like rebound leader Al Horford plus 235. I like Andrew Wiggins, game 3 leading rebounder at 11-1. I'm going to dig in to the finals prop averages. You can look at rebounds per game, assists per game, threes made per game. I'm going to be probably playing a little bit on each of those based on what we saw in game 2 and kind of combining the data from the first 2 games in Golden State. So that's where I'm at. Joe, I know your best bet so far is probably the game total under, but you're going to be considering some other plays that you're going to be posting on sportsmapelite.com tonight as well.
You hit it right on the head. Best bet right now is the under. We've also made it clear we like a side. There may be 1 or 2 other things coming, because I think that we have some other strong feels. But the total right now, that's my best bet. The side with Boston is right behind it, but we'll have more at sportsmapelite.com.
Sounds good. And we'll be back probably, I don't know, we're still trying to get this schedule down here, but at the latest, we'll be back for at least once a week for next week after the weekend's over. Maybe we'll try to squeeze in a show in between there. But again, this is the Pro Report with myself, Chris Dell, with Joe Spano. You can find us at sportsmapelite.com. You can also find my work over at bettingpredators.com as well. And you can find this podcast brought to you by Sports Map Elite. You can find it on all audio and podcast streaming platforms. You can also find our live video stream over at youtube.com. Just search Sports Map Elite there. You can find a link on Twitter. We'll have this on our Twitter live stream as well, on my personal page at Mad Journalist, MADD Journalist, as well as at Sports Map Elite on Twitter too. So with that, Joe, we'll kind of see what happens in game 3. We'll recap again. We'll kind of look at the numbers. We'll have our plays posted for every game for the rest of the series and continue to grind things out here. So with that, we'll see you guys next time. Best of luck in game 3 Wednesday night.
Absolutely. We'll see you